Living your best life with senior choices for you. Welcome. I'm your host, Brent Veasey. As always, we got to get it out of the way. How do you talk with me? Well, there's a couple different ways. Reach out with those digits, 936-900-3190. You can text or give me a call, whichever way you want to do it. Or you can reach out on the gram at senior_choices, Instagram. So, all kinds of stuff going on right now, right? And let's start off with some things that we talked about last week that I want to follow up on because it's kind of an urgent thing for some people in different ways, okay? Now, we did talk about how this Medicare annual enrollment is going on, right? Remember that. So, that deadline is now coming up. December 7th, folks. That's 2 days away from the taping of this show, okay? So we need to make sure that by midnight on Pearl Harbor Day that we have all of our selections done for the Medicare annual enrollment, okay? So that means looking at your documents, making sure you know what you've got on your current insurance, making sure you're happy with that. And then if you're not happy with that, then reaching out and touching someone with a phone call about what options are out there that could maybe make you happier, okay? That's what we need to be doing in the next 48 hours, okay? So if you have someone that you love that's on Medicare, check in with them and see if they've done their health insurance evaluation. That's what they should be doing. Okay, if they haven't, offer to help them do it. Okay, remember the basics. We want to make sure that our doctor is still on the insurance. We still want to make sure that any prescription drugs that we have is covered the way we want them to be covered on the insurance. If you have specific health issues that you want to make sure are addressed on your insurance, and they're addressed the way that you would like, hopefully with as low cost as possible, then make sure that that is on your insurance. And then if there's any little extras that you want, like you want some dental coverage, you want to be able to have rides to the doctor or go to the pharmacy, whatever that might look like, then you got to make sure this all gets done in the next 48 hours. Okay, folks? So this is stuff that we need to be focused on immediately, okay? And, you know, if I'm going to give an evil eye off camera, I'm going to look at Bob and say, Bob, you and Linda, we're good. Okay, so they say they're good. So that's the way it should be, okay? We want to be good like Bob and Linda, okay, on their insurance review, and they're comfortable with what they got, and they're happy with it, okay? Now's the time. Okay. Now, I did mention the open enrollment for the federal exchange. Okay, that's everybody else that's out there. All the rest of us that's not on Medicare. Okay. And if you're not getting insurance through your employer, or even if you are getting your insurance through your employer, okay, this is something that you should probably look into because you might be able to find a plan that's less expensive or has better benefits than what you're getting currently through your employer, even, okay? So, but this is especially for people that don't have any insurance at all, okay? So if you're one of those, then you got to make that decision, and you should be going to healthcare.gov, okay? And checking that out and looking at the great options they do have available there. This open enrollment for the federal exchange for health insurance is going to be open until January 15th. Okay, so we basically have another month to be able to check that out, look at it, and get it all done. Okay, now, if you enroll after the first of the year, then your insurance will have to be done retroactively back to the first. That's how that would work. Most likely. It just depends on the insurance. So you'd have to get in touch with your insurance and find out what their options are. Are they going to retroactively cover you from the first? Or are you going to have to wait until things kick off until February 1st if you enroll after the first of the year? Okay? Don't take that chance, folks. Okay? Go ahead and check those options out on the website. They have enrollment brokers. Okay, so these are insurance agents that are licensed to do just this work. Okay, and they are excellent. And they will only enroll you in a plan that you give them the parameters, the criteria that you want. Okay, so you want specific things, you tell the broker this is what I want, and wham bam, thank you ma'am, they give you a list of those plans that have those options available for you. That's how it works, and it's great. Okay, so make this happen. I know there's a lot of things going on right now with the holidays, all the gift shopping and everything else, which, do we have to buy gifts all the time for people? Is that what the holidays really are about? I'm just throwing it out there because with my family, what we're going to be doing is we are putting the prime attention on the time to have together. So my immediate kids and I and my beautiful Polly have decided that we're not buying gifts for each other, except for my little bit, okay? My grandson, he's going to still get gifts, and Santa's definitely coming, okay? So we have to get ready for Santa, for sure. But the rest of us adults, we're not buying gifts for each other because we want to be able to have those experiences that are more important. And that's what it's really about, isn't it? The experience, spending time with your loved ones that you want to spend time with, chit chat, reminisce, all that good stuff, right? So if we take the gift buying off the table, then it allows us to focus on these other things that we need to worry about, like our health insurance, okay? Now, if there are people out there across the United States that are on state insurance, Medicaid, okay, then you should have gotten letters in the mail telling you where you are regarding your state program, okay? If you did not, you need to reach out to your state Medicaid agency like now, okay? You really do. But you should have gotten a letter, and it should have told you you still are eligible for 2024, or worst case scenario, you're not eligible anymore for 2024. And then you could call them to look at different options, and or you go to the exchange, healthcare.gov, okay? In which case, if you were on Medicaid but not on Medicaid anymore, you'll be able to find a pretty good plan probably to be able to fall onto that's going to be pretty inexpensive and be able to do what you need to do. Folks, don't go through life with no health insurance. That's too stressful on you, and it's not a good thing for us, the rest of us either. Because when you show up and have to go into the hospital and you can't pay your bills and the hospitals have to, write it off, then they raise the prices for the rest of us. So don't do that. Take care of this insurance thing, folks. It's a big deal. And after the station break, we're going to go to our favorite topic of the day. Check in on Washington again here on Seeing Your Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Seeing Your Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey, and in our first segment, we kind of went through the hodgepodge of things that are happening right now. Okay, Medicare annual enrollment, 48 hours. We got to get that taken care of, folks. Okay? And then the open enrollment for the federal exchange, insurance exchange, we have until January 15th. So that's still something that we need to think about and be working on and looking at. Okay? Especially on Medicaid. If you're on state Medicaid, okay, you should have gotten a letter, and that letter should tell you if you're good or not. If you're not, then you need to call them immediately and then find out if there's other options with the state. And if not, then you got to go to healthcare.gov and enroll on the exchange, okay? but don't be insuranceless, okay? Because that just costs everybody more money, and we don't want to do that, especially yourself, okay? So don't do that. Now, Washington, our favorite place. What are they up to this week? Well, bless their heart. They are trying big time, okay? They are really trying. Now, they had some little things in the Senate and in the House of Representatives that they're having to take care of. And in the House, that meant getting the congressman from New York, who's been accused of some fraudulent activity. And some of the fraud that he's actually been charged with that's in court, the Congress did an investigation and he actually did other fraud on their own members, where he was accepting campaign donations from members who gave him their credit cards, and they said, hey, you know, look, I'll give you $2,000. And so he had their card numbers, and instead of charging them $2,000, he charged them $5,000. I guess it was an extra tip, you know, extra $3,000 tip, whatever that is. But he not only did that to the Congress people, and the men and women, but relatives of the congressman. There was a mother of a congressman who gave money to former Congressman Santos, who also had her credit card overcharged and then had fraud on it. So he's doing this to his own Congress people, and they had decided, well, we need to expel him. And so they expelled him, okay? Kicked him out of Congress. 105 Republicans and all the Democrats did that. You still had 114 Republicans vote to keep this person in office, including all of the leadership of the Republican Party in Congress, including the new Speaker of the House. Fascinating, isn't it? One reason why they may have done that was because now the majority that they have in Congress for the Republicans is down to 8, which means that they can no longer lose, they can only lose 3 Republican votes. Okay? So 3 Congress people that are Republicans can vote against something that they want to pass. And then after that, that's it. So their margin for error is smaller now, which maybe is the reason why they decided to vote this guy to stay in there. Don't know. But it's just a fact of that's where it is. They've made no progress yet on the appropriations bills in the House of Representatives. Okay, they still can't agree amongst themselves on the Republican side. Now, on the Senate, they had one thing that was holding them back, and that was the senator from Alabama who had put a hold on being able to approve all of the military promotions. Okay, remember that was the hold, and the only way that you could do that if all the senators don't agree is that you have to call each of those promotions up to the floor for vote, and that takes time, a lot of time in the Senate. And they did not really want to have that time be spent on that. They wanted to have that time be spent on getting the last appropriations bills that the Senate has to look at, and a couple of other things that they're looking at that's kind of important as well. Aid to Israel, Ukraine, and trying to do something at the U.S. border. So they wanted to do that instead of having to vote on. So they finally were able to come up with some plan that the senator from Alabama is now going to release the vast majority of those promotions. Okay? So now they're going to be able to all vote 100-0 on most of the military promotions and get them out and get the military back to functioning with a command structure that's up to date and good. You don't have the interim commanders and all that good stuff. So that's all good. Okay? And by doing that, they're now going to be able to start focusing on some of these other things, like finishing off the appropriations bills and hopefully doing something regarding the aid to Ukraine, Israel, and the border. Okay? That's a whole other separate discussion and mess, to be honest. But they do have that now, so they've made progress in the Senate to start getting things to the finish line on their side of things. House, okay, that one's looking, that's going to be fun, okay? And remember, folks, January 18th is when the first set of departments in the government start running out of money again. Okay, so we're looking at about a little over a month. Okay, and these folks are going to be leaving Washington in the next week or two to go home for the holidays. And they're not expected to be back there until after the first of the year. So the window we have to keep our government actually open and functioning is shrinking rapidly every day, with no progress being made on being able to get these things accomplished and done. And it's amazing because for the most part, between the Senate and the House, they have more than enough votes to be able to pass something and get it to the president for signature on the appropriation bills. They do. Okay? The whole problem is that in order for those bills to pass, okay, the Speaker of the House would have to have Democrats vote for those bills. Okay? A lot of the Democrats vote for the bills. Like a vast majority of Democrats. And that is what got the first speaker fired. Okay, remember, they have this rule where someone can just raise their hand and say, hey, I don't like you anymore. You can't be speaker anymore. I move that. And then the House has to vote on whether they want to have this. And if the speaker can't get 218 votes, then he loses his job. Or her job, if it turns out to be a woman in the future. That's the rule they have in place. And that's the rule that's being held over the Speaker Johnson's head right now. And keeping all of this in flux. Okay? What does this mean? After this station break, we're going to talk about what this means for the country as a whole when we come back on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey. We can't forget about our great show music, provided by the Silverman Sound Studio and Shane Ivers at silvermansoundstudio.com. That website has royalty-free music available for download and use, so all they ask is that you mention them after you use their music, like I am right now, and how they are supported by donations made on the website. It's a great resource with some great music options available, so please check it out and support it. All right, so now we're talking about Washington and our wonderful Congress, and we established that the House had their own mess to clean up, which they kind of did with voting to expel former Congressman Santos. The problem is it makes the Republican majority even smaller, okay? So less room for maneuver. The Senate had their issue, which was holding up military promotions. That issue has been fixed, and they're going to be able to get rid of that. And the Senate's going to probably be able to go ahead and pass their appropriations bills that have been voted on and passed overwhelmingly by their committee, the Budget Committee, with bipartisan support. Okay? So the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate have gotten together and came up with a budget that's going to keep the government moving and open for all of 2024. Okay? So you're saying, well, then Brent, why can't they just take those bills, put them in the House, and then the House just vote on them, and then we're good? Well, because voting on something that Democrats would vote on is how the last speaker got fired. Okay? And the Republicans have not gotten rid of that rule yet. And you've gotten that group of no's. Remember, I told you about them, the dozen or more, okay, House Republicans, better known as the Freedom Caucus, that say that we want what we want or nothing. Okay? So they've already said that they haven't been happy with some of the things that's been done, like the passing of the continuing resolution to keep the government open until after the holidays, going into next year. They already said, no, but okay. So they basically have already told the Speaker, Johnson, that, you know what, that was your gimmies. Now you don't have any more gimmies. So he is now on the thin ice section of our ice rink. So that if he does anything else that this group does not like, then they could bring up the resolution again to get rid of him. Say bye-bye again. Just like they did the former Speaker McCarthy. So he's in a bit of a conundrum, because the Senate has these bills that will probably end up passing with a huge majority in the Senate, because they were negotiated by Republicans and Democrats both, and most everybody likes it over there. And you, the American people, we will like it also, okay? Because it keeps it under the agreement that the president negotiated with former Speaker McCarthy on the debt deal, that we're only going to spend this much money, okay, total, okay, which was about $1.7 trillion ballpark. And they said, that's what we're going to spend. And the Senate said, okay, well, we're going to have each of our 12 bills add up to that number. Maybe 1% less, which is something that was allowable under the negotiation. And there we go. And they arrived at it, and the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats are like, yeah, that's great. We'd like that. So it'll probably pass soon, the last of those appropriations bills from the Senate. Now, when they get to the House, ideally, the Speaker would just go and take them, put them on the floor, say, here we go, here they are. Or they can open it, put them on the floor, they can open up for amendments, some changes, which if the House passes amendments on the Senate bills, then they have to go back to the Senate to be voted on again, or they go to the conference committee. Remember, that's the process. And all of that could still be done if the Speaker did not have the sword of Damocles hanging over his head, with this Freedom Caucus group saying that they're going to swing it the moment he steps forward and says that we're going to put something on the floor that a lot of Democrats are going to support. Because they don't want that. Period. They want to cut. Cut a lot. So that's where we are. And so far, there's no sign of how this is going to get out and keep us from having our government shut down in January. Because the Speaker has not shown that he's going to just say, okay, if you're going to fire me, try that again. Okay? Hasn't shown that willingness yet. And we don't have any indications that he's willing to stand up to that group accordingly on this or any other stuff that's going on up in Congress right now. So this is a very tricky situation. And remember, folks, that Moody's, the credit agency that monitors and gives us our ratings, that we're the best investment, so our bonds are able to still get the top of the line interest rates, Moody's has already warned us. They've warned the government, and they've said, if you can't come up with a federal budget, then you may not be able to qualify for the AAA plus anymore. And the repercussion of that is that the interest rates that we have to borrow money for are going to be higher, which means the interest payments that we have to make will be higher. So the federal government will end up spending more money, which is what this group doesn't want to have happen, on these interest payments that are mandatory, not discretionary. And all of this is happening because no. And nothing else will matter until we get what we want. And it's no. So folks, again, I get it, holidays, but this is something you need to be aware of, because these people are acting in our names. We the people, we're the government. So our representatives are supposed. So do we want this? Is this really what we want? I mean, we've had the discussion about the role of government, for sure. But is this really what we want, especially as we're going into an election year for 2024? A non-functioning government. Government that's not there to help people. That's the question we need to ask and answer at the beginning of the year. After this station break, we're going to step into the world of economics here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey, and we just wrapped up our talk about Washington and our Congress, specifically our House of Representatives, and the challenges that the Republicans in the House still have. Because now they have even a smaller majority, and you still have our No Caucus, the Freedom Caucus, saying that we can't pass anything that Democrats would vote for because that's just, can't do that. Even though that's really what's best for the country, a bipartisan approach to fixing our government funding on appropriations. So we're not going to do that. So, Speaker, if you go ahead and do that, then we may go ahead and move to have you fired again. That's where we're at. And the Speaker so far has not been able to tell us anything that he's going to do anything different than what this group wants for now. That's where we are. Economically speaking, what's going on out there? Well, we've been talking about inflation a lot on this show. And one of the reasons why we've been talking about it is because it's been so impactful on everyone's lives, right? Well, we had the consumer price index talked about, okay? So now, in the last week, the most preferred number that the Federal Reserve uses to measure inflation was released, that showed what happened for October, year over year. Okay? And this is the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index. So it's like, okay, remember, this is the index that measures what we are personally consuming on a regular basis. And that includes if we're deciding that, hey, I'm not going to buy Oscar Mayer wieners anymore. I'm going to buy the store brand wieners because the off-brand saves me some money. It even measures that because it's all about what we're consuming exactly. Okay? So it's supposed to be the best measure of what's going on with inflation in our economy. Okay? And from September to October, that number changed about 0.4%. Well, from August to September, that number changed. From September to October, and then going into November, that number was unchanged. So it went from 0.4% increase to unchanged. And the end result was that the personal consumption expenditure rate of inflation went down to 3%. 3%. That's it. Okay, folks? Now, when you take the volatile things that are in it, volatile meaning they go up and down a lot and very easily. So that's food and that's gas. So when you take those two things out of this number, okay, then the change was 0.2% increase month to month, which was down from the 0.3% increase from the previous months. Another trend down. So that core number fell from 3.7% to 3.5%. So the core personal consumption expenditure index is down to 3.5%. So 3%, 3.5%. Okay. The price of gas went down almost 5%, 4.9%. The price of groceries went up, but only went up 2.1%. 2.1%, folks, at the grocery store. So even the cost of groceries is starting to moderate. That curve that's been doing this is now going, starting to flatten. Really flatten. Okay? So, 2% is still more than what it was before the pandemic. But 2% is also where the Fed was hoping to have inflation, was 2%. So the groceries are basically already there, is the point. Okay? And the rest of the prices still is only at 3%. That's pretty good, folks. That is really good from where we were. Because this number, at its peak, the personal consumption expenditure index, was 7.1%. We are now less than half of that number. And that was basically in the midpoint or towards the beginning, in the spring of 2021, was when that number was there. 7.1%. And now we're down to 3%. 3%. Now, Europe has their inflation rate down to 2.4%. Okay? But their economy is now and starting to go going down. Okay? So our economy is still growing, folks. While Europe has raised interest rates so quickly and fast and high that their economy is starting to go down. Potentially maybe into recession. So what are we complaining about? I mean, that's ultimately the question that we have here is, what are we complaining about? What is so bad that we have to be as unhappy as all the polls say that we are? That the economy stinks, it's horrible, it's unbelievable, and so, yeah. Why? Why? The historical rate for inflation over our entire history, you know what that is? The historical rate, and this was in Forbes' last article that was mentioned this, which was this morning, is 3.1%. Where's all our inflation rates at now? Consumer prices, 3%. Personal consumption index, personal consumption expenditure index, 3%. So we are actually now below the average inflation rate for our entire history as a country. Okay? Those are facts. And we're below that rate, and we still have an economy that's growing. We still have some jobs that are being generated out there. Okay? We have fewer openings now than we have had in almost 2 years. But that's not a bad thing either, right? We still have jobs that are out there to find. We still have industries that are looking for people to find, right? So these are the facts. Let's get happy about them. Let's not be sad and angry about them. Let's be happy about progress and good things happening. After this station break, we're going to talk about that a little bit more and some other things that are going on in the economy here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm your host, Brent Veasey, and we've just talked about our inflation and how it's now down below what our historical average for inflation is in this country. Below. And this is the preferred number for inflation and measure of inflation by the Federal Reserve. Grocery price increases are now at the level, 2.1%, that the Fed wants the overall inflation rate to be at. Okay? Which is a hugely good sign. Okay? Because food was one of those costs that have been going. Do we still have things that are crazy expensive right now at the grocery store? Yes, we do. Okay? And those things are happening out there because of shortages. Okay? Rice is super expensive right now because the largest exporter of rice, the largest source of rice in the world, is the country India. And right now, India is not sending rice outside of its borders because their crops were largely wiped out by floods in their country. So they're just holding on to what they have so that they can feed their own people, which they should. You got to be able to feed your own people, right? So the price of rice is, yes, shooting through the roof accordingly. And there's some other things that are out there that are also doing that. But that's happening because we have shortages occurring, because we have war or weather, drought, flood, okay? Because we don't get anything else in between now, really. But the droughts and the floods are impacting our food supply in various areas. And that's why you have this inflation that you see in some of these individual products. But all areas of groceries are now up 2.1%. So, folks, why are we mad and angry about stuff? Gas is down 5% almost. I mean, we got gas here in Texas, in our part of Texas, southeast Texas. Some stations are down to $2.39 a gallon. $2.39. And we're going to complain. Seriously. We're going to complain. The economy is horrible. It's bad. Gas is $2.39. Inflation is 3%. People are still looking and hiring for jobs. And the economy is bad? Yes, there are people out there that are struggling, for sure. And for those that we just have to make sure we understand that's, yes. And there's a lot of people that are out there struggling to make sure that those ends are met for our best lives. Okay? But for a lot of us, that's not the case. And once upon a time, you can make the case that that was we were paying more for what we normally get. Okay? Well, that curve that was doing that is now doing this. And so that's real. It's not fake. That's real. That's what's happening. So we need to acknowledge that and be happy with that aspect that we have. For sure. Okay? We are on a sugar high. And that's what there's people out there, economists, that are saying exactly that. Because we had borrowed money to make growth happen to keep interest rates low. And that's what we did. And people are complaining about the deficit and all that, but that's the reality of it. When you cut $2 trillion of taxes and you give that money back, what's going to happen? Well, people are not going to go and save it or invest it for the most part. They're going to spend it. And that's what we did. Okay? But we were borrowing that money. And now the bills are coming due. That's how it works. That wasn't real. What's real is an economy that has job growth that's steady and inflation that's probably somewhere in the ballpark of 3 to 4%. That is what historically is the mantra and indications of a healthy, vibrant economy. For a free market economy, which is what our economy actually is. So that's where we're supposed to be. That's where we are, folks. In the early 80s, we would have given anything to have this economy. Remember, folks, when we had interest rates that were in double digits? Right? Remember that? 15, 16% interest rates? Now we're talking about interest rates that are in the ballpark of 6.5%, 7%, which is high, but is it still 15 to 17%? Inflation that was 10, 12, 14%. Remember that? That was about 40 years ago. That would be for our boomers out there, for our Gen Xers out there. We should be able to remember that. That was under President Reagan at the beginning of his administration and the end of President Carter's administration. So that is a definition of a horrible economy. Okay? 2008, when we had unemployment getting close to the high, into double digits. Remember that? Because of the financial system crashing. We had even elements of some deflation. We experienced some deflation during the pandemic. Which, that could be cool in some instances, but it's not really conducive for businesses to be able to make any kind of money and keep people employed, which is why deflation is a bad thing, generally speaking. It's very hard for us to lose track of what perspective is, okay? Because it's so easy to focus on that immediate backyard and not bother to look over the fence and see the rest of the world that's outside. Because we are so focused on a daily basis of what's going on in our immediate vicinity with our families, our homes, our neighborhoods, our loved ones. But the reality is that there's a lot of things going on in the world right now. And there's a lot of bad things going on as well as good things. Both. And there's a lot of other places in the world that are much worse off than we. So especially now, when we're trying and should be taking assessments of where we are as people, human beings, in the holidays, let's put perspective behind it. We're going to talk a little bit more about this after we come back from the station break here on Senior Choices. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Senior Choices. I'm Brent Veasey, your host, and we've just been talking about perspective and how we really should take stock of where we actually are in reality. Because when you compare it to where we have been in the past from an economic perspective, then things really aren't near that bad. In fact, in many ways, things are doing pretty good overall. There are people that are still struggling, and we have to be able to allow for things to happen that try to help them as well. Okay? But inflation is at a level that is at the, or now below the historical level of inflation on average. Job growth is still happening in this country. And there's a lot of things that are going decently that we just seem to not acknowledge. And I know that looking at the silver linings is not necessarily newsworthy today in a lot of news cycles that are out there. And the clouds are so much fluffier and dark and easier to focus on. But there's a lot of places in the world that are doing a lot worse than where we are right now. Which is another subject for us that we should be looking at. Because living our best life here means that we should care about what's going on in the rest of the world. Because what happens way over there is going to impact what we do and can do here. And I just said that earlier in the show. The monsoonal floods that destroyed the Indian rice crop. India is responsible for 40% or more, a little over 40% of the world's rice. That is now completely off the market because they barely have enough rice to feed their own people, so they're not sending it out of the country. That's why the price of rice here in the United States is doing this. Okay? The price of bread is still doing this because of what's happening in Ukraine. Because a lot of the world's wheat supply comes out of Ukraine. It also comes out of Russia. And Ukraine can't send any out, or can't send near as much out because its ships are being shot at as they're trying to leave its waters by the Russians. And the Russians aren't able to send out as near as much, or if any, because they're being punished for attacking Ukraine needlessly, killing tens of thousands of Ukrainian people. So what happens in other parts of the world does impact us here. Okay? And there's no greatest example of this than what we see actually what happens on our own southern border every single day. Okay? It's not an accident, and it's not their desire for these people to be showing up at our southern border and trying to get into the country. Okay? It's a journey that's amongst the most dangerous that you could take in this world. A decent number of people are going to die when they start leaving their countries in South America and Central America. That's a factual statement. Okay? It's a fact. And more people are going to experience violent behavior from others on that trip. With rapes, robberies, beatings. It's a horrible journey. Terrible. So why are they taking it? Why are they doing this? Walking, in many cases, thousands of miles to show up at our border and say, hey, we need to get in, and I know it's illegal, but I need to get in because it's that bad. That is the ultimate answer. It's that bad in their countries. Venezuela has more people leaving and having left it than Ukraine has leave its country. Ukraine is at war, and they still have less people leaving it than Venezuela. That's how bad things are in Venezuela. Bad enough, so bad, that you've got millions of those citizens leaving it and heading north to find anything that's better. Because you have the government, gangs, killing people, raping people, throwing people into jail, you name it. You have countries that are down in that area of the world that have massive droughts going on now. You have starvation. Okay? We see those images of kids on the TV screens from the World Health Organization, United Nations, UNICEF, KAIR, asking for money to help the people of Africa that are in drought and starvation. Well, that same thing is happening basically here in the Western Hemisphere, in Central America. Tens of thousands of people are not getting the amount of food they need the minimum amount of food on a daily basis. Because their crops are dead. They don't have the water to be able to irrigate them because of drought. Parts of the area have not seen rain in almost a year. That's happening, folks. People are starving. People are dying because of violence from gangs and governments not being able to control things. In other words, what happens in these countries is directly impacting what's happening right here in this country. Because we have tens of thousands of desperate people showing up at our southern border every day with only a very small hope to be able to change their circumstance. Because it's that bad. We want to do something about what's happening at the southern border. Let's start by caring about what's going on in those countries. If they have corruption down there, we should be able to help them be able to address it and fix it. They have drought. We should be able to help them do something about it. Because if we don't, then that's why they're here. Desperate people do desperate things. And there's nothing more desperate than walking your 5 and 10-year-old through thousands of miles of jungle with murderers and rapists and other animals that want to eat you and kill you, and disease, with any kind of faint hope for a better life. Let's care about what happens everywhere else as well. Perspective. Hope today has been a good show for you. Hope I gave you something to think about, some thoughts to think about. Living your best life with senior choices. It's all about that. Let's make those senior choices better. I'm Brent Veasey, your host. Touch base again next week. Take care. Goodbye.